The team unfurled a poster afterwards which simply said Pele and had a picture of Pele from 1970. So there have been any number of very poor reports on how close Pele might be to death, to put it starkly. He's certainly a very ill man. Whether or not he passes during this World Cup remains to be seen. He may well live for many years thereafter. But it's funny, anytime I'd ever contemplated Pele's passing, I just assumed Brazil would come to a complete standstill for however many days or even a week or two. It just had never occurred to me it might happen during a World Cup. It's an extraordinary possibility, and again, hopefully it doesn't happen. But I presume in some respects, there must be a great sadness and it must be talked about a lot. But then obviously the World Cup is kind of the story and the biggest story in town as well. So it's a striking one. It's hard to know what to say about it in some respects.
I'm gonna go for the positive side.
Sure.
The world of football being together at this point in time in Qatar, it means that everyone's together there to send love and respect to Pele, who I think is still sufficiently well to feel that.
Right.
And he loves that. And remember, this is someone who hasn't played for Brazil for over 50 years. So he's someone with whom the current generation of players have grown up with as a kind of reference. But unless they're from the Santos club, like Neymar or Rodrigo, they don't necessarily have a very, very personal connection with him. I think Neymar does, because they both come from Santos. Now, Pele, since he stopped playing, was very effective doing public relations and also guarding his own legacy. And why not? He sweated blood to leave that legacy. So I'm sure he is loving the respect that he's feeling at the moment. So in that sense, it's positive. It's going to happen one day.
Sure.
He's 82. He's got cancer. Whether he is no longer responding to the chemotherapy, that's something that we don't know. It's something that heavyweight Brazilian media are reporting, but we've got no official confirmation of that. The last we've heard, as far as I'm aware, from the hospital in an official capacity was on Saturday, when they said that his condition hadn't worsened in the last 24 hours, and he was responding to treatment. But it neither confirmed nor denied this line in the Brazilian media that he's no longer responding to chemotherapy, in which case it is a matter of time. How much time, we don't know. I know that there's a TV channel that I'm doing a show every day for during the World Cup, and I know that they are on standby footing should the bad news happen.
Yeah.
It may not, it may be a while, but it's going to happen. And I find it positive that the world of football has had a chance to get together and pay tribute.
There's an extraordinary video on Twitter over the last couple of days. I suspect you must have seen it somehow, but I retweeted it.
The first time.
Yeah. So in effect, if anyone hasn't seen it, and I retweeted it, the world has retweeted it, you'll find it on Twitter very easily. Gary Lineker, etc. have all retweeted it. In effect, it's shots of all the iconic things that different modern players have done, be it Cruyff doing the Cruyff turn, or certain things Maradona's done, or some of Zidane's pirouettes, etc., flicks over heads. And the theme of the video is everything you've seen the great players of the world do, Pele did them first. And it's interspersed with Pele doing these exact things. I mean, I did think to myself, well, Cruyff has a cheat calling this the Cruyff turn based on this evidence. This is unbelievable. And it really, it was footage I hadn't seen before. I don't know, had you seen all this before? Because to me, I was seeing things that just I'd never seen.
Yeah. It's ironic that Pele is so associated with the World Cup. But I don't think the World Cup ever saw him at his greatest, because he was fantastic as a skinny kid in '58, and he was fantastic as a wise old owl in '70. But he was at his peak in '62 when he got injured in the second game of the World Cup. My favourite World Cup goal he scores in his career is the one he scores against Mexico in the opening game of that World Cup. If you want the Club World Cup final that year. Now, that's a new competition. It's only started a couple of years earlier. Champions of Europe and South America. And it's really serious. And it's Santos against Benfica.
Yeah.
And the first leg in Brazil, Santos win 3-2. Benfica consider themselves favourites for the second leg. And Pele just runs amok. Just absolutely runs amok. He puts them 5-0 up. And you're watching a creature from a different species tearing into the European champions and absolutely destroying him. He was so far ahead in so many things. And he was a global icon of football before the game had globalised. He was an absolute machine in physical and technical terms before such things existed, before the level of physical preparation permitted this for the majority. And his brain was just so quick, difficult to play with, you know. I spoke to Toshnal, who was a centre forward with him in 1970, at length on this, and he said, you had to be clever and quick to play with him because his mind is just working so quickly. Recently, Joe, there's been a backlash against him. Nothing to do with his illness. I'm talking in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a backlash against him, partly because journalism has never covered this story at its finest in the attempt to create Pele good guy, Maradona bad guy. Both of them are much more complex individuals than that. You don't get as good as they were at football without having an edge to you.
Yes.
And the younger generation, I think, have reacted badly to the image of Pele as a suit, whereas Maradona is the rebel.
Yeah.
But that has spilled over to football. And I saw recently people, this is something that didn't happen in Brazil, it cottoned on outside. Name your 3 greatest players ever for Brazil. And loads of people did this list without Pele. I think a very famous British TV presenter nothing to do with the sport usually, did his list and didn't have Pele in it. It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. Maybe Pele himself and his supporters have been wrong in stressing so much 1,000 goals. Because it is, in a way, it's a bit of a joke statistic. It's a pumped up statistic. And it doesn't explain the greatness of Pele, because the greatness of Pele is how good he was in the big games, where he was just off the scale in the big games. So there's an opportunity to reevaluate that backlash as well, because it's criminally stupid. Criminally stupid. He's I see Pele in many ways as like a perfect synthesis of so many things, but also emotionally. The 2 main motivating sources in life are pride and fear, and he had them both in spades. The pride was from his dad, who was a very good footballer with huge pride in the profession, who on his big break suffered an injury that plunged the family into poverty. The fear comes from his mother's reaction to that. And his mum didn't want him to be. His mum was a very strong character at a time when it was hard for a woman to express that. It was hard for a woman to work. It was hard for a woman to have an independent life. And a lot of that force went into, and he writes about this, his mother's fear of not being able to provide for the kids. And so his mum never wanted him to become a footballer. Never. It was too insecure. You know, study a little bit, get a steady job in a civil service or something like that. So he had to take on firm maternal resistance to the idea of becoming a footballer. But that fear that he got from her was always in the back of his mind. And it's something that just propelled him. He had to be better. He had to be stronger. He had to be fitter in order to keep the fear away. And he's just a machine of playing football that I don't think has been seen before or since. This just extraordinary machine with everything, and I hope that he's well enough, certainly to enjoy this World Cup, but to have some more quality. You don't want him lingering on just suffering. You want him having quality, enjoying the tributes, enjoying what's happening now, because this habit that the world has every 4 years of coming together, he's the one who did it. He's the one who made the World Cup into this 4-year festival. So I think it's just so fitting that it's happening at this time, that he's in hospital at this time. At least he can see his legacy.
Yes.
And he can feel the love coming in, Because all of us, in any capacity, who make any kind of the most insignificant possible, like ourselves, and make our living from football, we are midgets standing on the shoulder of a giant. And the biggest giant of them all is Pele. And it's tribute to the game as well. You're talking about a poor kid from the wrong side of the tracks, a shoeshine boy. The king of world football. The democratic nature of the game is supremely manifested in the figure of Pele.